already there. You're what makes America great. This engagement with this process, because we have this amazing democratic republic that people take for granted. You know, I went down to Cuba, to Havana, with PBS. This was about 15 years ago, before the Elian Gonzalez thing. And if Americans could just take a minute and see what it's like on the other side, where you're not afforded this wonderful liberty and this freedom, you get a real sense of appreciation of what we take for granted. And I was in Berlin, a week before the wall came down.
Wow.
I went back there a year later to study at the Academy of Berlin on the reunification for a month. And the difference was amazing. Like, before the wall came down, it was sort of like, the Wizard of Oz in the beginning, where it's black and white and it's monochromatic. It was just like that, except it smelled like urine. A year later, all the big ads were on the eastern side. Capitalism, free market economy, it hit Eastern Germany, and the people benefited. When I was down in Cuba, I talked to the writers and the cartoonists down there. The writers, they have to go through a political committee and a national committee to get their stuff in their national newspaper, Grandma. The cartoonists can't even draw Fidel Castro or Che Guevara. I was interviewing the interior minister. He was the guy who would come out every night and say how horrible America was for trying to keep Elian Gonzalez here in the free land. And I got to ask him a bunch of questions. I asked him about the Brothers in Arms flight that was shot down in international airspace. He wouldn't answer the question. I asked him about the tugboat full of 28 people that they was trying to escape to America, and they caught outside of Havana Harbor. Instead of bringing these people into safety, they towed them out to sea outside of eye range and hosed them down, women and children. He wouldn't answer any of those. I asked him a bunch of questions. He wouldn't answer any of them. So I turned to him and I said, I talked to your writers, and they have to go through political committees. I talked to your cartoonists. They can't draw Che Guevara or Fidel Castro. In America, we believe that a country that can't make fun of its leaders is usually a country that's imprisoned by its leaders.
Good point.
So let me just ask you one question. And they zoomed the camera in on his face. And I said, what's your favorite Fidel Castro joke? And his face just went white. And he sat there in silence for about 40 seconds, which is an eternity on television. And little beads of sweat started gathering on his forehead. And he finally said, I don't know one, but I'll tell you one later.
You're lucky you got home.
I know. I did everything I could to get arrested in Havana. It's startling what we have here in America.
Right.
What's so fantastic about this country. And being engaged is what it's all about, this freedom. The Paris attack, there's a quote often attributed to Voltaire, but it's actually from Evelyn Beatrice Hall, who said that, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. This freedom is so important. This despicable act in Paris wasn't just an attack on cartoonists, it was an attack on freedom and liberty,
Right.
and an attack on freedom-loving people everywhere in the world. The cowards who committed that crime, they should not only be condemned for the evil that they represent, but the evil act that they perpetrated, but for the evil they represent. And this same ideology that wants us to conform to a certain pattern and wants to limit our free speech is abundant now in our society. And it's something we need to fight against, because this freedom of speech is what affords us the liberties that we have. The Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, which was approved by the National Assembly of France by the Marquis de Lafayette in 1789, said that this freedom of speech was a natural, unalienable, and sacred right of man.
Good.
And it's too often here that we take this liberty that we have for granted. Think about this administration and all the lies that they perpetrated over the last 7.5, 8 years. Imagine if we didn't have the freedom to challenge these people. Remember that President Obama said the war on terror is over, that Al-Qaeda is on the run, and even assuring us in the last State of the Union that the shadow of the crisis has passed and we turn the page on terror, and his military and expert diplomatic leadership has made the world safer. It's unbelievable, these lies that are being perpetrated by this administration. I mean, think about it. 9/11 was created by 19 guys funded by a few Saudi millionaires, and they caused trillions and trillions of dollars of damage, and almost 3,000 Americans died. Now with ISIS, you've got anywhere from 15 to 30,000 people that are cycling through training on how to kill human beings and be returned back to their homeland. And they have Western passports, American passports, European passports. And they're being funded because through criminal activity and the siege of oil fields. And at one point, I think they're getting $1.2 million of revenue a day. And what makes me so furious about this is now I was in Iraq, in Baghdad, a year ago. The last time I'd been to Baghdad was about 9 months after the surge, in the middle of the war. And I have to say, I felt safer in the middle of the war than I did just last year. It is unbelievable what this administration has done, how they've tied the hands of our soldiers, and what they've done to pull the rug out from everything that's been accomplished. Because after the surge, that war was won. And I've been on every part of Iraq. You fly by helicopter from the Green Zone to the different areas to Tikrit, up to where the Kurdish guys are in Kurdistan. There are long stretches of highways connecting these cities. What makes me so furious is that when you leave from Kuwait to go into Baghdad, you leave from Ali Salim military base, the most northern air base in Kuwait. And it goes right next to what they call the 60-mile highway of death. Now, I don't know if you recall, during the first Kuwait invasion, that we asked the Iraqi troops to surrender. And instead, they raped and pillaged their way up north. We caught them out in the open, leaving Kuwait, heading up to Baghdad, and we obliterated most of their military right there on that 60-mile stretch of highway. Now, the very first time that I looked up ISIS, the first image that showed was an 8-year-old girl in her Sunday dress who'd been beheaded. Now, you know that the president was privy to much worse atrocities than that. And people aren't even thinking about the thousands of people that have died. Now, ISIS is basically the reconstituted forces of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Saddam's military command. They relocated across the border north. When they're coming back in on a long stretch of highway, the president had an opportunity to take them out. He could have stopped them before they got oil revenue, before they became a big, self-moving force, and stopped all of this nonsense before it happened. So it's unfortunate that we've been stuck with this administration, but hopefully things are going to change.
Yes.
In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But while these rights are indeed endowed by a Creator and guaranteed by our Constitution, it is government that upholds these liberties, and it is men who constitute the government." And unfortunately, in our country, we have some people that believe the Constitution is merely a starting point for negotiation. We need to change that. James Madison wrote, "I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments by those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations." I think that's never been more true than the last 15 years. I think